Today, I will tell you about a shocking tragedy that occurred in Australia. In a secluded corner of a rural farm, a naked female body lay motionless on the green grass. Her body was covered in injuries, and blood stained the entire area. But the most terrifying detail was her eyes. They were wide open, frozen in a final moment of fear and despair. When police arrived at the scene, even the most seasoned investigators had to turn away. They couldn't bear to look at the horrific sight before them. The case was later described by judges as one of the most brutal and barbaric murders in Australian history. Public outrage erupted. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, demanding the reinstatement of the death penalty to punish the savage beasts who had lost all traces of humanity. So, what really happened? Let's turn back the clock to 1986 and uncover the tragedy that shook Australia to its core. Blacktown is a suburb located in the western part of Sydney, New South Wales. It has a temperate climate and beautiful landscapes, perfect for family vacations. As a culturally rich and diverse community, Blacktown's residents come from all over the world, speaking more than 60 different languages. It is truly a multicultural place. However, during the 1980s and 1990s, Blacktown became a hotbed of criminal activity. Gang violence was rampant, drug trafficking surged, and the area drew special attention from law enforcement. The story we're about to explore today is one of the darkest chapters from that time. A case that happened right in the heart of Blacktown. The main character in this story is Anita Cobby, a 26-year-old nurse. She was cheerful, outgoing, stunningly beautiful, with a well-proportioned figure, and had once been crowned a local beauty queen. At the time, Anita was working at a local hospital. On February 2, 1986, she finished her shift as usual. Anita was usually very punctual, but that day she didn't show up for work the next morning. Her phone was unreachable. Her best friend and coworker, Lynn, started to worry. She called Anita's parents, only to be shocked when they said Anita had come home the night before. Lynn clearly remembered that the previous afternoon, after they got off work at around 3:30 p.m., she and Anita, along with a few friends, went to a nearby restaurant. They chatted, shared 2 bottles of wine, and didn't leave until around 8 p.m. Since Anita's home in Blacktown was quite far from the city center. Lynn gave her a ride to Sydney Central Station so she could catch the 9:12 p.m. train. Anita had planned to call her father from a public phone once she arrived so he could pick her up. But when Lynn contacted Anita's family again, she learned that Anita had never called her father and never came home. Mr. Gary Lynch, Anita's father, was deeply concerned. At first, he thought maybe she had stayed overnight at a friend's house since the gathering had ended late. But now, she was completely missing. He immediately contacted friends and searched throughout Blacktown and the greater Sydney area. But no trace of Anita could be found. Finally, by 6:30 that evening, he had no choice but to call the police. The police launched a search operation right away, but Anita had vanished without a single trace. Based on their past experience with missing women, the police suspected that Anita might have been harmed by someone she knew, so they began investigating her background and personal relationships, hoping to uncover a lead. Anita was born on November 2, 1959, in Blacktown. Her father, Mr. Gary Lynch, was a graphic designer in the Australian Army, and her mother, Grace Lynch, was a dedicated nurse. Anita grew up with her younger sister. Both girls were excellent students and loved sports, especially surfing. Anita was always the center of attention. Even as a child, she looked like a doll, incredibly cute and lovable. As she grew older, she blossomed into a stunning woman with delicate facial features, a tall figure, and a radiant presence that could rival any movie star. In 1979, she won a regional beauty contest. With her charm and talent, Anita could have easily pursued a career in entertainment. However, Anita had her own plans. She didn't want to rely on her appearance to make a living. Instead, she wanted to do something more meaningful. So she followed in her mother's footsteps and became a nurse at Sydney Hospital, formerly known as Sydney's Western Suburbs Hospital. It was there that Anita met John Cobby, the man who would become her boyfriend and later her husband. John was born in 1956, 3 years older than Anita. He was handsome, with blue eyes, blonde hair, and a cheerful, lively personality, always the joker among his group of friends. John had a fairly ordinary background. He had done all kinds of jobs, from laundry work to dishwashing, and even working as a security guard. Whenever he saved up some money, he'd go surfing, living a carefree, easygoing life. But eventually, John wanted to settle down. He enrolled in a nursing training program at the same hospital. That's where he met Anita, the girl he quickly fell for. But Anita's radiant beauty made him feel self-conscious. He only admired her from a distance and didn't dare approach her. However, fate often has its own plans. Anita noticed this always smiling guy and was drawn to his humor and energy. She took the first step and introduced herself. Their first date was at a Chinese restaurant near the hospital. After just one dinner, the two began to develop feelings for each other. From then on, they often met, talked, and laughed together. Their bond grew quickly, and they soon became an official couple. After more than a year of dating, John finally mustered the courage to propose to Anita, and she accepted without hesitation. On May 27, 1982, the beautiful couple officially became husband and wife, surrounded by the love and blessings of their friends and family. Everyone said they were a match made in heaven. Their married life was sweet and full of happiness. Though Anita sadly suffered a miscarriage, they didn't let grief consume them. They remained hopeful about the future. Together, they adopted 2 adorable puppies. They often dined out, listened to music, and even bought a small boat in preparation for future trips. In 1984, thanks to a friend's introduction, John started working in horse training. A year later, fortune smiled on him. He won a horse race and received $10,000 AUD, a significant amount at the time. Thanks to that unexpected windfall, the couple were able to fulfill their dream of traveling the world. They enjoyed one of the happiest times of their lives. By 1985, after they had spent the money, they returned home, and life went back to normal. However, it was around this time that tensions began to rise between them. John wanted to settle down. He dreamed of buying a house and starting a family. But Anita, still in her 20s, felt that life was just beginning. She had dreams of continuing her studies, getting a degree, learning Spanish, and traveling the world. Their goals began to diverge, and disagreements became more frequent. Finally, in early 1986, they decided to separate. Anita moved back in with her parents in Blacktown, and John returned to live with his own family. However, after some time apart and having calmed down, the two agreed to meet again to talk things through. On February 1st, 1986, Anita and John met again after their separation. They listened to each other with open hearts and gained a better understanding of one another. They agreed to discuss everything together in the future and were both willing to compromise to rebuild their relationship. That day, Anita went to John's house for dinner, and the two even talked about buying a house together. They also made plans to attend John's sister's birthday party a few days later. It seemed like things were finally getting back on track. But then, Anita suddenly and mysteriously vanished. What made the situation even more suspicious was John's reaction upon learning that his wife was missing. Instead of going out to search for her, he bought a bottle of white wine and brought it to her parents' house to drink with her father. Mr. Lynch, who was already unhappy with John after the separation, became furious when he saw his son-in-law showing up with wine while his daughter was missing. He scolded him harshly. John didn't respond. He quietly turned around, went home, and went to sleep. At that moment, many people's first reaction was obvious. He must be the one responsible. The police thought the same. They considered John the prime suspect and decided to bring him in for questioning. However, just as the investigation was taking shape, a shocking report suddenly shifted the focus of the case. In Prospect, a field south of Blacktown, a local farmer noticed something strange. His dairy cows had gathered in a corner of the pasture, surrounding something on the ground and refusing to move. Curious, he approached the spot and witnessed a horrifying scene he would never forget for the rest of his life. On the grass lay the naked body of a woman, face down and covered in blood. Much of her skin had been torn or stripped away. Terrified, the farmer immediately called the police. A large team of officers rushed to the scene. After a preliminary examination, forensic investigators discovered that the body bore multiple wounds and clear signs of sexual assault. But what broke everyone's heart were her eyes. They were still wide open, as if the agony and despair of her final moments were forever frozen in them. Forensic analysis concluded that the victim had been nearly decapitated, and that the time between the slashing and her death lasted approximately 2 minutes. 2 minutes long enough for someone to experience a living hell. At that time, the only woman reported missing in the area was Anita Cobby. So when police found the body, they removed the gold wedding ring from her finger and gave it to her family for identification. When John Cobby saw the ring, he collapsed to the ground, crying, because it was the wedding ring he had personally chosen for Anita. Next, Mr. Gary Lynch, Anita's father, came forward to identify the body. With trembling hands, he opened the white shroud. When he saw his daughter's bloodied, wounded body, he couldn't bear the shock and collapsed onto the bed. When he woke, he sobbed, "Anita, my daughter." The 26-year-old, once full of life, had endured unimaginable suffering before losing her life on that terrifying night. Even the police were shaken by the brutality of her murder. Many officers silently vowed to catch the monsters responsible and make them pay. The investigation's first suspect was John. In the interrogation room, he appeared panicked, his eyes hollow and lifeless. Police pressed him. "Admit it, you killed Anita." At first, John resisted, but faced with mounting pressure, he eventually broke down in tears and confessed, saying, "It must have been me." The fact that he confessed so quickly made the police suspicious. Furthermore, John's mental state was clearly unstable, making his statements unreliable. The police then interviewed John's friends. All of them insisted that he loved Anita deeply. Even after their separation, he still worried about her. They argued there was no way John could have killed his wife. Forensics also contradicted the police's initial theory. The marks on Anita's body indicated that more than one person had been involved. Her time of death was established between the evening of February 2nd and the early morning of February 3rd, 1986. During that period, John was confirmed to have been at his mother's house, making it impossible for him to commit the crime. It became clear the police had arrested the wrong person and forced an innocent man into a confession. The investigation shifted back to the crime scene. Police asked the farmer if he had heard anything unusual on the night of February 2nd. He recalled hearing a woman scream from a nearby field but assumed it was a couple arguing and dismissed it. Police then identified that field in Prospect as the primary crime scene. But despite a detailed search, they found no immediate clues. So the investigation moved to the last known location Anita might have been: Blacktown Railway Station. A female officer dressed in a uniform resembling Anita's boarded the 9:12 p.m. train from Sydney to Blacktown. She showed Anita's photo to passengers along the way, but no one provided any useful information. Police also discovered that all public phones at Blacktown Station were broken, which explained why Anita hadn't been able to call her father. Using these clues, the police formed a working hypothesis. At approximately 9:40 p.m. on February 2nd, after disembarking from the train in Blacktown, Anita attempted to call her family but found no working phone. She also couldn't get a taxi and likely decided to walk home. Making it possible, she encountered danger along the way. Police began investigating the route she usually walked home. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras, so they focused on individuals with prior records for sexual or violent crimes, but still found nothing decisive. The case seemed to stall until the morning of February 3rd, when an officer reviewing reports spotted a vital detail. A young boy and his sister had witnessed something unusual on the night Anita disappeared. They said they heard screams on the road. Looking out their window, they saw a girl being dragged into a dirty white car with gray primer. The boy ran out, but the car had already sped away. They immediately reported the incident to the police. Shortly after, a neighbor of the siblings and his girlfriend got into their car to search for the suspicious white vehicle. They found it parked near a palm plantation, but it was empty, and they saw nothing else in the field. Additionally, a 16-year-old boy reported that at around 9:45 p.m., he heard a scream lasting about 30 seconds. When he ran outside, he saw a white car speeding away with its lights off. Through the rear window, he saw two men holding a struggling woman inside. The police, after receiving the report that evening, sent officers to search the surrounding area, but found no results. Based on the clues, they believed the kidnapped woman was most likely Anita. They immediately launched a citywide search for the white car. However, while everyone was busy with the investigation, another troubling incident occurred at 9:00 a.m. on February 6, 1986. Roger Clemson, an Australian television presenter, suddenly went on air and announced Anita's autopsy report live on television. He even read aloud the shocking details. He said that after reading the report, he was furious and felt the public had the right to know. So he took it upon himself to broadcast it. The broadcast shocked the entire country. Phone lines at the police station were overwhelmed. People were both outraged by the leak and horrified by the brutal details of the case. But for the police, this was a major setback. The widespread knowledge of the autopsy was like startling a snake. It made the investigation far more difficult. They immediately launched an internal investigation, but the source of the leak was never found. Ironically, the incident also brought some unexpected benefits. People across Australia began to actively provide information and voluntarily donated money to support the investigation. The New South Wales state government offered a reward of $50,000 AUD to anyone who could provide valuable leads. On February 10, 1986, Anita's family held a funeral. A large crowd attended to say their final goodbyes. The most devastated person at the funeral was John Cobby, her husband, who had earlier been falsely suspected. During the ceremony, he suddenly lost control, screaming, "Don't take her away! Please don't take her away!" His voice was filled with despair and helplessness. Eventually, Several people had to pull him away from the coffin. Since Anita's death, John had been completely devastated. Drowning in alcohol, living day by day, even wishing that one day he might die from an overdose just to be reunited with her. It was clear that he truly loved Anita, and his earlier confession had only come out of extreme emotional pain. This funeral wasn't just a farewell, it was a wake-up call for the entire Australian society. Public anger and concern mounted, putting enormous pressure on the police. Fortunately, the very next day, the case saw a major breakthrough. While reviewing their records, police discovered a report of a car theft that had occurred on the same day Anita was abducted. February 2nd, 1986. The stolen vehicle was a white Holden Commodore, closely matching the description of the car believed to be involved in the case. Following this lead, the police quickly identified the three men suspected of stealing the vehicle: John Travers, Michael Murdoch, and Leslie Murphy. All three were already known to law enforcement, especially Travers. His name was extremely familiar to the police. Travers had a history that could be described as a textbook example of a criminal upbringing. His father was an alcoholic, a gambler, abusive toward his family, and involved with drugs. His mother was reclusive and unable to properly care for or discipline her children. As a child, Travers displayed disturbing behavior, particularly an obsession with torturing animals. He was even known to commit sexual acts with them. Multiple witnesses had seen him abusing sheep, pigs, chickens, and other animals. He was also a known sexual predator. Travers frequently used knives to threaten women and even men, whom he targeted at train stations or in public restrooms. Despite being only 18 years old, he had already been involved in at least 12 incidents of sexual assault, making him a true predator. His accomplices, while not quite as depraved, were still dangerous individuals. Michael Murdoch, also 18, was considered a loyal follower of Travers. He spent his days drinking, stealing, getting into fights, and loitering. Leslie Murphy, age 22, was known for his hot temper and had been arrested multiple times for theft. All three had criminal records, and given their recent involvement in the theft of a white car, the police quickly identified them as the prime suspects and soon arrested them. During police interrogation, the officers did not initially bring up Anita's case. Instead, they focused on the car theft, trying to gauge the suspects' reactions. Leslie appeared calm and answered smoothly, showing no obvious signs of guilt. However, John Travers remained completely silent, either too nervous or simply not clever enough to hide his panic. Out of nowhere, he suddenly blurted out, "I didn't cut her throat." The police had never mentioned anything about Anita's throat being cut, so this spontaneous statement was considered a confession. Travers was immediately arrested. As for Michael Murdoch and Leslie Murphy, the police temporarily released them, but placed them under secret surveillance. On February 22, 1986, while in custody, Travers asked the police if his girlfriend Catherine could bring him some cigarettes. The police agreed and seized the opportunity to ask Catherine for her cooperation. She agreed without hesitation and wore a wire during her visit with Travers in prison. Unaware he was being recorded, Travers bragged in disturbing detail about his involvement in Anita's murder. He laughed while describing the torture she endured and confessed that it wasn't just him, Murdoch, and Leslie Murphy involved. Two of Leslie's brothers, Michael Murphy and Gary Murphy, had also taken part. He even asked Catherine to help destroy the murder weapon, burn the clothes, and get rid of the white car used in the crime. More disturbingly, Travers proposed a plan to escape from prison. He wanted Catherine to sabotage the railway tracks near the prison so a train would crash, allowing him to escape. If that failed, he planned to have Leslie and Murdoch come and break him out. whether from arrogance or delusion. His plans were shockingly elaborate. Police then had Catherine wear a wire again and sent her to Michael Murdoch's house. From that conversation, they obtained more incriminating details. With the information and recordings from both of Catherine's visits, police were able to locate the murder weapon, the burned clothing, and the stolen white car. The investigation then turned toward the remaining suspects. Michael Murphy, 33, was the oldest of 9 children. He had previously been sentenced to 25 years for multiple violent crimes and had escaped from prison. Gary Murphy, 28, was seen by neighbors as a quiet and hard-working man. But he had a long history of car theft and antisocial behavior. With eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and confessions, police arrested all 5 men involved. From the day Anita Cobby was murdered to the arrest of every suspect, it took just 22 days, an extraordinary display of efficiency by the Australian police. One chilling moment occurred during the raid on Gary Murphy's house. He was so terrified that he dropped his pants as police entered. During interrogation, based on detailed testimony from John Travers, investigators were able to piece together the full sequence of events. On the night of February 2nd, 1996, 5 drunken men, John Travers, Michael Murdoch, Leslie Murphy, Michael Murphy, and Gary Murphy, were driving around when they spotted Anita Cobby walking home alone. Struck by lust and cruelty, they dragged her into their car and drove off. In the cramped vehicle, all 5 took turns raping and beating her. Anita fought back, begging them to stop. "Please don't do this. I'm married. I'm on my period," she pleaded. But her cries for mercy only enraged them further. One of the men even held a knife to her throat and threatened, "Shut up, or I'll kill you." On the way, they used Anita's money to fill up the gas tank and drove toward the southern paddocks near Prospect. Once there, they dragged Anita, still alive, out of the car, pulled her through a barbed wire fence, and threw her onto the ground, continuing to torture her. At that moment, a car approached. 2 people got out, holding flashlights and looking around. Realizing this, the entire gang dropped to the ground and covered Anita's mouth. Those 2 people were John Paulson and his girlfriend, the same couple who had earlier seen Anita struggling in the car. They were incredibly close to her. Just a few more steps and they would have seen her. Unfortunately, the darkness concealed everything. They missed their only chance to save Anita. Some believe that even if they had found her, the outcome might not have changed. They could have been harmed as well. The 5 men continued to torture Anita for at least an hour. When Michael Murdoch sobered up, he began to panic, fearing they'd be caught. He said, "She's seen our faces and heard our names. There's no way we can let her live." Everyone agreed with the decision, but no one wanted to act first. In the end, John Travers took out a knife and slit Anita's throat. After committing the murder, they quickly fled the scene and burned the clothes they had worn that night. However, Travers had kept a pair of her underwear as a trophy, not realizing that this disturbing souvenir would later become crucial evidence that helped convict him. On May 16, 1987, the trial, dubbed by the media as the trial of the century, officially began. The 5 defendants were brought to court amid nationwide outrage. Outside the courthouse, massive crowds gathered, holding banners and effigies of the killers, demanding the reinstatement of the death penalty for such evil. The 5 criminals were charged with over 50 crimes, including kidnapping, car theft, robbery, prison escape, sexual assault, and murder. Still, they refused to admit guilt, each trying to shift the blame onto the others. 4 of them claimed that Travers alone was responsible for killing Anita, hoping for reduced sentences. Murdoch's lawyer argued that intense media coverage would bias the jury and requested a postponement. Gary Murphy's attorney claimed his client had a low IQ and couldn't distinguish right from wrong, so he shouldn't be held fully accountable. But with overwhelming evidence, all these defenses were in vain. On June 10, 1987, after 54 days of trial, all 5 men were found guilty of abduction, rape, and murder. On June 16th, the New South Wales Supreme Court sentenced all of them to life in prison without parole. Since Australia had abolished the death penalty, this was the harshest sentence possible at the time. The case, which had shaken and enraged the Australian public, finally reached its legal conclusion. During sentencing, Chief Justice Alan Maxwell hesitated, visibly emotional, and said, "This is one of the most horrifying sexual crimes I've ever encountered." The prosecutor described Anita's murder as one of the most sadistic and savage crimes in the history of this country. The Anita Cobby case deeply moved all of Australia. It became the subject of numerous true crime documentaries and left a lasting impression on film and television. In her memory, the government named a park in Blacktown after her, so that people in this peaceful land would forever remember the life of this unfortunate young woman. Hopefully, tragedies like this will never happen again. Today's video ends here. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.